It began with silence. Not the kind of silence that brings peace. Not the kind that follows a long, ordinary day. This was different. This silence carried weight. It settled over a quiet, desert neighborhood in the early hours of February 1st, and in that stillness, something unthinkable happened. By sunrise, there would be blood at the front door, a camera ripped from its mount, a phone left behind, and an 84-year-old woman gone. Her name was Nancy Guthrie, and for more than 50 years, she had built a life defined not by headlines, but by quiet strength, steady routines, and deep connection to the people around her. No one imagined she would vanish without a trace, and no one could explain how it happened so fast. The woman no one expected to lose. Nancy Guthrie had spent decades living in the desert foothills outside Tucson, in a place where privacy wasn't just valued, it was part of a landscape itself. Her home sat among cactus and open sky, tucked away in the peaceful community of Catalina foothills. It was the kind of neighborhood where neighbors waved from a distance, where nights were dark and quiet, and where routine offered comfort. Nancy believed in routine. She showed up for church. She met friends regularly. She played mahjong, read constantly, and stayed engaged with the world around her. Even as age brought challenges, a pacemaker, hearing aids, daily medication, her mind remained sharp, her presence steady. She had lived through loss before. When her husband died suddenly in 1988, Nancy faced the unimaginable task of rebuilding her life while raising her children alone. She did not collapse under the weight of grief. Instead, she moved forward with quiet determination, building a career at the University of Arizona, where colleagues would later describe her as composed, thoughtful, and deeply respected. But Nancy's greatest role was not professional. It was personal. She was a mother, a grandmother, the emotional center of a family that depended on her steadiness. One of her daughters, Savannah Guthrie, had become known across the country as a co-anchor on the Today. But Nancy never lived in that spotlight. She preferred something simpler, quiet dinners, familiar conversations, and the comfort of home. She had plans. She had routines. She had a life still very much in motion. And then, in less than 1 hour, everything changed. The last normal night. January 31st began like any other day. Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law. They talked, laughed, and spent several comfortable hours together. There was nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Nothing that suggested this would be the last time they would see her. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy arrived back at her home. Her garage door opened. 2 minutes later, it closed. Her son-in-law watched from a distance, making sure she was safely inside. That moment would later become the final confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie alive and unharmed. The house returned to stillness. Lights off, doors closed, routine intact. But sometime after 1:47 a.m., something or someone entered that stillness. At exactly 1:47 a.m., Nancy's front door camera stopped transmitting. It did not malfunction. It did not lose power. It was disconnected. 25 minutes later, a motion sensor activated on her property, but no usable footage remained. Then, at 2:28 a.m., another signal disappeared. Nancy's pacemaker stopped communicating with her phone. Her phone itself was later found inside the house, left behind. That detail mattered. It meant she had not walked away, willingly. Something had interrupted her routine. Something had removed her from her home. And it had all happened within 40 minutes. 40 minutes between normal life and total disappearance. The scene no one was prepared to see. By late morning, concern had already begun to grow. Nancy had plans to watch a church service with a friend. She never missed commitments like that. She was punctual, reliable, predictable in the best possible way. When she didn't arrive, calls were made. Texts were sent. There was no response. Family members went to her house just before noon. Her car was still there. Her wallet was inside. Her medication remained untouched. Her hearing aids had been left behind. Nancy would never have left without those essential items. Then came the discovery that changed everything. There was blood near the front door. Not a small amount. Not something easily dismissed. DNA testing would later confirm what the family already feared. It was Nancy's blood. Nearby, the doorbell camera itself was missing, removed completely. Investigators would later confirm signs of force at the scene. This was not a voluntary disappearance. This was an abduction. The figure in the darkness. In the days that followed, investigators recovered fragments of footage from the camera system. What they saw raised even more questions. A single masked figure appeared outside Nancy's home during the early morning hours. The person wore gloves. They carried a backpack. At one point, the figure reached toward the camera, attempting to block its view. They knew it was there. They knew what they were doing. Their face was completely covered, their identity hidden. The footage did not show Nancy being taken, but the timing aligned perfectly with the moment her pacemaker disconnected. The implication was clear. Someone had come to her home deliberately. Someone had removed her. And someone had disappeared into the darkness without leaving obvious answers behind. Messages that deepened the mystery. Then, just as investigators began searching for physical evidence, another disturbing development emerged. Messages arrived at media outlets. The sender claimed to be Nancy's kidnapper. The messages demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin. They included deadlines, warnings, instructions. But there was one thing missing. Proof of life. There was no video, no audio, no confirmation Nancy was alive. Authorities reviewed the messages carefully. They did not immediately confirm their authenticity. The family responded cautiously. They asked for proof. Something real. Something undeniable. Days passed. Deadlines expired. Nothing came. The messages had created urgency, but not clarity. They left behind only more uncertainty. A daughter's plea. As the investigation continued, Savannah Guthrie stepped forward publicly, not as a journalist, but as a daughter desperate for answers. She recorded a message directed at whoever had taken her mother. Her voice was controlled, but the emotion beneath it was impossible to miss. She asked for proof of life. She made it clear the family was willing to talk, willing to do whatever was necessary. As days turned into weeks, her messages changed. They became simpler, more direct. "It's never too late to do the right thing," she said in one appeal. She repeated it, not as a demand, but as hope. Her public presence shifted completely. Her work paused. Her focus narrowed to one purpose, bringing her mother home. Each message carried the same steady determination. She refused to give up, even as uncertainty grew heavier. An investigation without easy answers. Behind the scenes, the scale of the investigation expanded rapidly. Law enforcement received more than 30,000 tips. Every call had to be reviewed. Every lead had to be examined. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined local authorities, including the Pima County Sheriff's Office. Homes were searched, vehicles examined, potential suspects questioned, but no arrests were made. Investigators explored multiple theories. Was it a burglary that escalated? Was Nancy targeted because of her daughter's public profile? Was it a planned kidnapping from the start? Each possibility remained open. Each possibility lacked definitive proof. Weeks passed. The answers remained just out of reach. The glove that changed everything. Then, nearly 2 miles from Nancy's home, investigators found something. A glove. At first glance, it looked ordinary, but its color and material closely matched what had been seen in the surveillance footage. It was sent for DNA analysis. The results revealed something critical. An unknown male DNA profile. It did not belong to Nancy. It did not belong to anyone known to her family. It belonged to someone investigators had not yet identified. That discovery introduced a new possibility, a direct biological link to whoever had been there. The DNA would be compared against national databases, including Cody's. If a match existed, it could identify the suspect. If not, the profile would remain on record, waiting for a future connection. For the first time, investigators had something tangible, something that could speak, something that could eventually lead to a name. A community changed overnight. As the investigation unfolded, the quiet neighborhood Nancy had called home transformed completely. Media trucks lined the streets. Cameras pointed toward her house. Neighbors installed new security systems. Porch lights stayed on longer. The sense of safety that once defined the community had been shaken. Residents who had once trusted the silence now questioned it. Every unfamiliar vehicle drew attention. Every unusual sound raised concern. The disappearance had left more than unanswered questions. It had left fear, and it had left a void, waiting for answers. Investigators continue to analyze evidence. DNA results continue to be processed. Tips continue to arrive. The masked figure remains unidentified. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. Her family continues to hope. Savannah's message remains unchanged. It's never too late. Because somewhere, someone knows what happened during those 40 minutes. Someone knows where Nancy is. And until that truth emerges, the silence that began that night will continue to echo, not just through one home, but through an entire family still waiting for her return, and through a mystery that remains, for now, unsolved.